If we look at that separate layer graph, so we've got all the sensors on that probe, and we have a look, what we can see is that we were getting water all the way down the profile, which is why that summed graph came all the way back up to the top. We were filling it each time. And so that plant was able to get through a really, really tough season, getting watered every 16 days. And so it really depends, until you start to see how the plant responds, until you can listen to that crop, you just don't know how it can handle things, and also what is the effect of your irrigation in terms of wetting the soil. Here is a guy that made a change in the season. He started off, he was going backwards early on through here, and so he knew he needed to get back up to there, so he made a change. He was putting on 1 inch each time. He slowed it to 1.40 inches. And by the way, this guy, he was at Hugoton, southwest Kansas, sandy soil. And after 2010, he said, Dave, I'm going to get a probe because I'm worried about drainage. I've got sandy soil. I know I'm draining water or leaching water through my profile. So he put the probe in. Well, he was sure that 1 inch was going to drain right through his sand. He was so surprised when he looked at this. By the way, before I go, well, actually, I'll go forward and I'll come back. What he saw was that he was getting water in at 4 inches, but he was hardly even getting it in at 8 inches. He was going backwards and nothing at 12 until he made that change and he started getting water into the profile. So he could see that he was getting off track, made a change and got back on track, and just backed that up. He ended up getting 198 bushels. Other fields that he had and other fields around the district were all going 130, 140. And so he actually said that change of slowing it from a 3.5-day loop to a 5-day loop saved him, or made him, or saved that crop. He also said he probably could have gone even slower, but it's one of those things, it's baby steps. He didn't think that if he went even slower that soil could hold it. And so he's now really, he's learned a lot about his whole farming system and just how different 2 seasons can be. Leaper, or bubblers. This was a trial run by the Texas Alliance for Water Conservation down near Plainview at Lockney, and had one circle of corn that was set up, everything was on spray, and then it all got changed back to bubbler mode except one span. And so we had probes in either span, and what we can see is early on, while it was in spray, things were going backwards. They were both the same. And then with the bubble mode, things got changed over, and very quickly we can see this stair-stepping back up and filling the profile. Didn't happen with spray mode. Why? Because the water wasn't going in the soil, it was being lost to evaporation. We can see that. If we look inside the soil at that separate layer graph, let's just focus for a minute on a lot of information here, but just focus on this purple line at the bottom. And what we see on the spray mode is that we get that stair-stepping. The roots were active down there because they needed to be. The water that was being applied, a lot of it was being lost. That plant had to try and keep up with its water demand, so it took it out of the soil. Well, once we switched over to, and early on, this green line, it's easy to see, 28 inches the roots were going down. Here, 28 inches the roots were going down. But suddenly, we started putting more water into the soil through the bubble mode, and so it didn't need to. It was just about to, it was going here at 36 inches, didn't need to get to 40 because suddenly it had water up higher in the profile. More of what was being given to it was available to the plant, as opposed to the spray mode, it was being lost. And so that plant had to keep going and keep putting its roots down to try and keep up with what it needed. And if you zoom in on this is the bubble mode leaper, we can start to see the stair-stepping. So we see this pink line here. I mean, early on that the spray wasn't really even getting to 16 inches. Then with the bubbler, it did. It's getting to 20, it's getting to 24, and we can watch those stair steps going upwards. At each of those levels, we can see the soil filling up. We know what's going on out there because we're measuring it. We're measuring it to manage it. If you compare that to the spray side and have a look, even at 24 inches, bear in mind we're stepping up at 32 on the other side, it's flat. Having trouble maintaining or starting to bank water there because more of it's being lost. There is a difference in the efficiency there. And if we have a look at the yield data, bugger. That span that was on spray did not get differentially harvested because there was a miscommunication with the contract harvesters. They just went through and did the whole field. But what I can show you is what happened on a neighbouring site. Same with Texas Alliance for Water Conservation. Had a farmer just east of Plainview, one circle, half cotton, half millet, and he did exactly the same thing. All spray to establish the crop, flicked it all back to bubble mode except for one span. And the difference is there. He did it himself, he harvested it, and he said that with cotton, 122 pounds difference just from spray to bubble. With his millet, 230 pounds difference just from spray to bubble. And he said every time he does this, he gets the same result. And so it's all about not just what you pump out of the ground and what you get to the ground, it's what's available to that plant, getting it in, away from the evaporation. Don't coat the leaves, because everything that goes on a plant is not available to it. It's just going to evaporate off again, especially in a season like we've just had. So LEPA, in a wet year, is going to give you the opportunity to shut down more. That presents other hassles with sprinklers getting stuck. And my last example here is about timing. And so if we understand this relationship here, where we've got more water than we need, and then less water than we need, and more water, what can we do to bring that line up? And bear in mind, we don't need to bring that line up. If you said, right, I'm only going to grow half the area, instead of having 5 gallons per acre per minute, I'm going to grow half a circle and have 10 gallons per acre per minute, great. I can now move that bar up to here, and I know that I'm going to be able to fully irrigate that crop. But guess what? There's a lot of capacity in there that's going to be wasted. So what am I going to do? I only need it for a short period of time. Then also, if you understand this yield versus water applied curve, and understand that there is the right amount of water for each crop. That's what strategic irrigation management is about, is just putting the right amount on at the right time. And if we start off here, we don't apply any water, but the stored soil moisture, we'll get a dryland crop, we'll get some yield. Then as you put more water on, you're going to get a really good value for every inch, but that starts to diminish as you get up onto this plateau. And most people, corn growers that I've met, are operating up here in this flat area, and straight off the bat, not in 2011, but in any other year, you could save quite a bit of water and not affect your yield at all, because water is not the limiting thing. Thing is, if water is the limiting thing because you've got low pumping capacities, if it's the limiting thing because regulations are coming in, then you're operating down this part of the curve. So where is, what does that relationship look like? And by the way, it's actually it's closer to the economic optimum. You're not going to, think of this, if you're trying to convert gasoline into miles driven, you're going to get, just like we're trying to convert water into money, you're going to get a much better conversion rate doing 55 miles an hour than you are doing 85 miles an hour. You get better mileage. And so that's what we're trying to think about here in terms of yield. How high are you trying to do the show crops, or are you trying to get best value out of your water? So anyway, there's a strategy here where a farmer from up at Stratford wanted to understand that relationship. I presented some of this last year, so I'll whip through it because I want to show you what's the effect in 2011. But basically it was a limited water versus full water. Full water was nominally what was allowed under the regulations, 24 inches. Limited water was half that, 12 inches. And the aim was to maximise water use efficiency. Had a lot of in-crop rainfall, so didn't use all that, used probes to shut down and not pump, and saved a lot of pumping costs, but that wasn't really why this was done. If we have a look here, the strategy, and bear in mind this was light water, 400 gallons, 450 gallons a minute kind of water, so we're less than 4 gallons per acre per minute, if I'm correct. And it's, so we are in a really water limited situation for growing corn, so the strategy is whatever you do, don't get behind. It's none of this dry down, wet up, none of that. Just keep it wet and then dry it down at the end. And that strategy has paid dividends, 248 bushels, 17 inches pumped, good story. Except there was some drainage early on, so with the season, with all that rain, probably could have got by with maybe 16 inches of water. Weren't prepared to do that because don't get behind. Shallow ridge system, 28 inches, we'll show you that in a sec. If you have a look at the limited water situation, guess what? It got behind. It's exactly like what happened in 2011, but set out to do that. And if you've only got a short amount of water and you know the value of every inch and you want to put it on at that critical time, then you fire all your ammunition during that critical time, but that crop could never get back up here because they're constrained by the capacity of the system. Only 400, 450 gallons a minute. Don't have the volume to get it into that soil and wet it back up again. So still wasn't a wreck at all. 194 bushels, 12.7 inches. If you get your sowing rates, your fertilizer strategy in line, it's just as profitable. But that's not really the story here. The thing is that there was a 60 bushel spread on yield with about a 4-inch difference in irrigation. And how do you take that, find that extra 4 inches and turn it into that extra 60 bushels? Well, if we look inside the soil, we can actually see, and this is a really good example of showing how roots go down, we can see things are flat and then they start to step, root activity at 40 inches, 44, 48, 4-foot root system, big. But with the constraints on the system in terms of the pumping capacity, the nozzle only get water into 12 inches. Compare that to, and by the way, roots went all the way to 60 inches down here. On the full water side, actually had some drainage. What we can see is a blip here. These blips going up, that's because the soil is full like a sponge. You put water on a wet sponge, it's totally full, it's going to come out the bottom. Well, it goes real quick. And as it moves past those sensors, they blip up and blip back. That's a drainage event. So that's why we could have probably even cut back some more. And by keeping it wet, that plant thought, well, don't have to try. I'm not going to get my roots down deep. Sure, they went deep later. And they were growing there, but they weren't really active and effective. They weren't adding a lot to the water use. So how do you get the best of both worlds? Well, let's think about this. If you've got excess capacity here and under capacity there, anyone that's doing a corn-cotton split already doing this. You're trying to spread your peak water use. You split your circle, try and spread your peak demand, and corn early, cotton later. Try and you can windshield wipe one side, windshield wipe the other side. In this situation, it's a case of didn't want to grow cotton, higher elevation, not going to work so well. Let's do corn, early plant, late plant. While the late plant is establishing itself and you're letting it take water out of the soil, take that pumping capacity and put it on the other side there. Had the pipe work to do it, 2 450 gallon a minute wells, tie them together. Hey, now you've got 900 gallons a minute. Good stuff, we're in business. How did it look? We've got this graph here where early on we're focused on letting that plant take water out of the soil. We're focused on irrigating the early circle, so all that water is going on the other crop, which is at its peak demand, and then suddenly switch over and put the water on and try and catch up again, and there's your strategy. And guess what? It worked. And it worked because you got 217 bushels in a really, really tough year where that ordinarily would have been 450 gallons a minute and not enough to grow corn, especially in a year like we've just had. So that strategy worked. And it's all about the timing. And so if we have a look at what went on in the soil, we can see those roots went all the way to 56 inches. I know that because I'm looking at it. I can see here they went to 60. They probably went beyond that. But then when we irrigated, we've got this grey line here at 36 inches, even at 40. Managed to fill 3 feet of that. So previous year with only 450 gallons a minute, could fill at the top foot, add all that extra capacity, it's gone into the soil, it's available to that plant, there's your extra ammunition. And so it's all about the timing. Everyone's getting hungry, I better finish up. So just to summarise, it's water availability to the plant, that's the key thing. It's not just the volume, it's the effectiveness. It's trying to not just get water out of the ground, it's getting it to the plant and getting it there at the right time. And therefore, strategic irrigation management is vital. You are turning water into money, so you want the right investment strategy, and you want the right investment strategy depending on what are the market conditions, i.e. the weather. And so you want to match irrigation with plant needs, work within the constraints of the system, and water, this 2011, if it showed anything, water has the single biggest impact on yield. And it's all about the water, so you need to measure it to manage it. And just remember, every year is different. This is about risk management. It's about staying on track no matter what. So with that, I've gone over, but I started late, so I invite questions.